Hey everyone, it's Simi Shaw, and welcome to Trailblazers. On this podcast, I dive deep into the journeys of trailblazing South Asians, sharing the stories of the leaders and dreamers lighting the way across the South Asian diaspora. Today, we have a special guest, and that is Paraag Marathe, president of 49ers Enterprises and executive vice president of football operations. Paraag is no stranger to football. He's in his 21st year with the 49ers and previously served as team president and chief operating officer. On the football side, Paraag serves as the team's chief contract negotiator and salary cap architect, while also overseeing the team's football analytics department. He has played an integral role in rebuilding the 49ers' current roster, including quarterback Jimmy G. He also oversaw the development of Levi Stadium and Leeds 49ers Enterprises' minority ownership stake in Leeds United as vice chairman of the English Premier League club. So far, I have covered football and soccer, but I am not done yet. Paraag was named chairman of USA Cricket in 2018. In case that wasn't enough, Paraag moonlights as a faculty member at Stanford's Graduate School of Business, where he himself earned his MBA after graduating from UC Berkeley. Paraag, I am so excited because you have so much to talk about today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Of course, happy to be here.
So I've typically found that starting at the beginning helps contextualize where you are today. So I want to start with the 6-year-old kid who never missed a 49ers game. You've spoken extensively about how you love sports growing up and even saw yourself playing professionally. But how did that eventually manifest as a career in the business of sports? Can you tell me about that Jerry Maguire moment?
Yeah, sure. So I played sports and consumed sports my entire life. I loved anything with a bat and a ball and the competition. And I played baseball and soccer for most of my life through high school and college. And my hopes and dreams ended when I stopped growing at 5'9" and 150 pounds. I thought, all right, well, that's it for me. And just by chance, I watched the movie Jerry Maguire with Tom Cruise and Cuba Gooding Jr. And I was like, wow, there's this whole other side of the business where you don't need to be a player or a coach. You could be an agent or a GM or something like that. And there's this whole other side. So it was from then on, I thought I wanted to be a sports agent for a number of years. And I was still at Cal. I was a sophomore in college. And I applied to like every sports agent. I didn't apply because there wasn't any jobs. I wrote cover letters and letters to every sports agent in the Bay Area or close. And only one responded. Everyone else ignored me. And most of which I know now, and they all claim that they never got it or they wrote back. But it was only IMG that reached back out to me, and they didn't really have anything as a sports agent, but they did on corporate sports representation. So I interned at IMG for 3 years in college, and the rest is history.
So yeah, can you tell me a little bit about your time at IMG and then also at Bain? What were you specifically trying to do in terms of building out this skill set in the field of sports?
Yeah, so I was just cutting my teeth. I was honestly just learning as much as I could. And at IMG, it was corporate representation. So it was when big brands wanted to do endorsement deals with athletes. So I remember I worked on Cadillac sponsoring Tiger Woods.
Oh, wow.
Helping Cadillac understand the value of an endorsement of Tiger Woods and what that would bring. It was different things like that. So then after I graduated, I realized sports is a tough world to break into in terms of compensation. You either get paid very well or you get paid nothing. The 3 years I was working at IMG, I had barely enough money to cover my BART fare from Berkeley to San Francisco every day.
Wow.
And so I was like, all right, I can't be net negative anymore. So I went into management consulting. Fortunately for me, because of my sports background, anytime Bain had a sports related client, they put me on the project because of my prior experience. So my next taste of sports business was Nike was a big Bain client and is one. And so I was put on a handful of Nike projects for Bain. So things around the sports business. And so I learned a lot more on the business side. And then actually fast forwarding, Bill Walsh and the owner of the 49ers hired Bain to work on a project, like a 3-month, almost pro bono project to work on evaluating draft picks in the 2001 draft. And I say pro bono because the Niners weren't paying full rack rate management consulting fees, but they got the benefit of marketing that they had the 49ers as a client. It was a nice trade. And it was nice and perfect for me because since they weren't paying full rack rate, Bain partners weren't putting a lot of attention to it. So they said, oh, let's just put a bunch of kids on the team to work on it. And again, I was the sports guy. So I was the kid that got to do most of the work. And that's where, I spent a lot of time those 3 months down here at 49ers headquarters and really sort of got along with everybody here and started my career at the 49ers then.
Yeah. So can you tell me a little bit about that project that you worked on with Bill Walsh? I mean, what do you think he saw in you that made him say, I want Paraag to join our team?
I don't know what he saw specifically. I know what I was, and I was just hungry, eager, wanting to learn, and very, very passionate about what I was doing. I mean, 49ers headquarters was like a temple to me growing up. Grew up a stone's throw away from this facility in Santa Clara.
Yeah.
And so, just being under the same roof inside the same walls as Bill Walsh and Terry Donahue and Steve Mariucci and Jeff Garcia and Terrell Owens and all these great players, it was just a dream come true. So I was just committed to doing whatever it took to be successful on the project and to help the team. And so hopefully he maybe saw a little bit of that and saw the passion and work ethic that I had. And that's why he offered me a job.
And do you mind sharing a little bit about the project you worked on? I know it centered on data analytics at a time when that was relatively new in the space. I'd just love to hear you talk about it and hear about how that tech forward mindset has carried you through your career.
Yeah, it was a project to evaluate draft slots in the 2001 draft. And so what that means is it wasn't actually nothing to do with players at that time. It was more the exchange rate, the currency value of each pick, whether it's worth $100 or $96 or $52, whatever it is. And so then when you make trades, you could actually have via an algorithm the best exchange rate to maximize value for you. And so that was the project. So it was just looking at the historical last 20 years of draft and basically a giant expected value analysis of successes and failures at each pick. The weighted average of that determines an expected value for each pick. And so there was an old currency value, an old exchange rate. And my job was to come up with a new exchange rate that better reflected expected value as opposed to best case scenario.
Super interesting. So you work on this project, Bill Walsh brings you on. Tell me about your early days at the 49ers.
Early days of the 49ers was just trying to cut my teeth and learn as much as I could. I started my career mostly within football operations. So it was all around contract negotiations, research, salary cap analysis, and things like that. And started to get into some player analytics. So like trying to figure out what athletic measurements or physical traits are good predictors of performance, things like that. And so it was just kind of like an analyst grunt, just doing as much as I could. It was tough because this industry is very black or white, and there was not a lot of room for other colors, and certainly not a brown guy.
Yeah.
Certainly not one who never played football competitively in high school, college, or certainly not the pros, or had a dad who played. So I was coming in at a disadvantage, and not just NFL, but pro sports in general is very much an industry about who you know, not what you know. And I didn't have a who. So I didn't come in because I had a dad or a relation that got me connected. So I was looked at very critically, both inside and outside the building. And so just having to fight through that. And it wasn't something that took months. It was something that probably took a decade to earn respect.
Wow.
And so just needed to keep my head down and do the best I could.
How did you grapple with that? How did you stay motivated to work super hard despite the fact that for the better part of a decade, it sounds like you felt like an outsider?
Well, just loving what I do and wanting to make an impact and help the team. That was something that I was very motivated by. By the way, forgive the music if you can hear it outside. We just started practice. My office is right oversees the practice field. So
that's awesome.
Playing music pretty loud. So I apologize in advance. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So just tuning out the noise.
Yeah.
It was an easier time then because there wasn't Twitter and social media. I would have my mom call sometimes and be like, oh, my gosh, are you okay? I read this about you. And they're saying this, like thinking that I'm completely impacted by it. And the truth was I never read it in the first place. So she was the one who made me feel like crap because it was better than I, tuning out all the noise. But yeah, it was just to do your job. And as long as I was passionate about what I was doing, and that was all that mattered.
Yeah. Something that you touched on a second ago that I think is really interesting and to a degree obvious is this is a pretty untraditional field for South Asians to go out and pursue. I mean, did you ever get any pushback from your family or people in the community or just have doubts yourself?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, most of my family thought that this wasn't a job. It was just like a hobby that I was doing, some after
Yeah.
school project, because, every child of an Indian immigrant comes and success is defined as being a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer. And I was none of the above, and I was doing this weird job about a sports team. There was no IPL then or anything. So like people didn't even understand. They just thought it was just a total hobby and nothing more than that.
And you mentioned, for example, your mom calling you talking about this article that was written and you kind of tuning it out for the most part. But I think what's interesting, at least what I've understood about your role, is that someone in a non sports version of your role would see their work play out in the profit or in the numbers. More often than not, you would see your work play out on the field with millions of other people scrutinizing every decision. I mean, what's that like? How do you grapple with that?
Yeah, I mean, you are what your record says you are. And each game with only 16 games has so much more significance to your season. But, in 2004 is when I started taking on more of the business. And for 7 years, I was president and COO of the team as we were trying to figure out where to build a stadium and how to finance it, how to market it and sell it. And that has its own set of metrics and rewards, right? The goal was being able to build a stadium, be able to host a Super Bowl, be able
Yep.
to move ourselves from being second to last in the league in revenue to being second in the league in revenue. That's something that has tangible rewards to it. And so I have the benefit of having both ways of trying to measure success.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. I feel like you've got the balance of the two. You just spoke to the fact that in your tenure at the 49ers, I mean, you've overseen such significant projects and innovation, from the development of Levi's Stadium and an increased ownership stake in Leeds United, and I'm sure many others. Which has been most meaningful?
Interesting question. My passion is I still love the sport. And so going to the two Super Bowls were probably the most meaningful. Unfortunately, we lost both of them and lost them both in tragic ways. But those were two special moments. I think obviously building the stadium, something that the 49ers were trying to do for 2 decades prior. At the time we were playing in the oldest unrenovated stadium in the NFL and trying to figure out where to do a stadium. That was probably the most significant milestone or touch point in my career that I could reflect on and be like, all right, that we accomplished something very significant. Now, I am really enjoying, as we are within 49ers Enterprises, as we've tried to transition ourselves from being a billion-dollar lemonade stand of an NFL team to being a multi-billion-dollar sports and entertainment company, and a place to be able to, for lack of a better term, satiate my intellectual curiosity in doing more things. And so whether it's building a T20 cricket league here in the US or getting involved in the Premier
Yeah.
League and with Leeds United, other efforts that we're trying to do, some of which we'll announce shortly. It's just been great. And we have the people and the resources and the mentality to be able to go do it. So I think that's been really rewarding recently.
Absolutely. I was also going to say, to your point on tragic losses, I'm from Atlanta, so I understand what that feels like.
But you've had a good week.
We've had a good week. I mean, for the first time in a really long time, and people are really, really stoked here. It's been awesome.
That's great.
So I want to ask, you're president of 49ers Enterprises, but a lot of people don't typically understand that that comes with other responsibilities. And I think what's so fascinating about your career is it's not entirely football focused. You closed this deal to increase the team's ownership in Leeds United. You've been appointed vice chairman. You took up the position as chairman of USA Cricket in 2018. How do you think about wearing all these different hats, and how did this all transpire?
Yeah, it is sometimes difficult to juggle, especially because I've got my day job at the 49ers. So, when the draft comes around or when free agency comes around, I'm definitely dedicated to football. And I still negotiate every one of our player contracts, for example. And so
Yeah.
that has its own sort of priority to it. And so it's difficult to juggle at times, especially because of some of the time differences. It really means that my phone has to be on
Oh, wow.
24/7. And my wife hates it because I went from being live or die 16 times a year for 16 49er games to now being live or die for 54 games because we have 38 Premier League Leeds United games.
Yeah.
And I'm getting up at 4 a.m. to watch those games sometimes. And so
Wow.
the other reason she hates it is because now I also have to go over to the UK once a month or so for responsibilities there. So it travels a lot more challenging and difficult. But again, it's just around the intellectual stimulation and curiosity and being able to build and get out of the mindset of yesterday's sports team, which is a lemonade stand, to being much more of a bigger sort of sports and entertainment company.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I want to spend a second on your actual day job. I mean, you have incredible responsibility being the chief contract negotiator and salary cap architect. From a strategic and tactical perspective, how do you think about these responsibilities? How do you approach them?
How do I approach them? So I think with respect to the football job, it is all around trying to figure out how to maximize return and minimize risk. And trying to think about, obviously you want to win this year, but you want to build something for sustained success.
Yeah.
And so I think that is at least the crux of my job to help John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan with the football team, is helping us keep us in a competitive position where we can stay sustainably competitive. It's very similar to what the goal is now at Leeds, is to stay sustainably competitive within the Premier League. And, one thing that's helpful in doing a lot of sports and doing different things is there's a lot of cross learnings too. There's things that I can take from cricket or the global football world that I can import into the NFL, into the 49ers, and vice versa. So that part has actually probably helped me become more well rounded and helped every one of the organizations I'm a part of.
Can you share some of those cross learnings?
I could think of two. So, one, they do a very good job across the pond in consolidating health and performance, from your trainer to your psychologist to your internist to your strength and conditioning coach to your rehab person. They're all sort of under one roof. And
Mm,
so it's very coordinated. As a player matriculates from injured player to healthy player, it's all coordinated. Whereas in US sports, it's really only changed in the last 5 years, or maybe even the last 3 years, where it was still very disjointed.
mm.
And so, like, a doctor would finish surgery and he'd just pass off to the rehab person. And then the rehab person, when the person's healthy, would just pass off to the strength coach. And you wouldn't necessarily know exactly, like, well, wait a second, this guy shouldn't be doing so much on his bench press. He should do fewer reps because he's still at this stage. And so
Mm.
that's something that we changed 3 years ago at the 49ers to just make it much more integrated. Something on the business side is, again, across the pond, they do such a great job with membership of supporter groups. So
Okay.
you've got your season ticket holders, yes, but they also have supporter groups, which get special access, like access to single game tickets or special content, or opportunities for VIP events at the team's facility, things like that. And so we've taken the learnings from that. We formed the 49ers supporters group, mutually exclusive from the season ticket holders. There are overlap, but it's not necessarily, it doesn't need to be, and
Interesting.
provide special benefits to that supporters group. So very similar.
Wow. Super, super interesting how it all piles into one another and gives you all this different perspective. I imagine something else that's contributed to that is you've been with the 49ers now for over 2 decades, and you've held a variety of roles from being president of the organization and COO. Can you speak to those different roles and your ascent through the organization?
Sure. It's just, I sort of view myself as maybe a little bit of a Swiss Army knife. It's more around, where do I think and where does ownership think I can add the most value? And at the time of building the stadium, it was building our organization as we were going from 60 or 70 people to 300 people, and building the
Wow.
stadium, right? And now it's trying to build much more than that beyond just the football team. And so I think it probably comes down to this, and it's something that I've learned over the years, and that is that for any person, not just myself, but really for any person, they should really identify what they are best in the world at, what they are better than any of their peers at. What are those
Mm,
skills or what are those traits that you're better than anybody else that you know at? And you should spend the majority of your time doing that, because that's the best way to optimize yourself and leverage yourself. Because if you spend the majority of your time doing something that maybe at best you can be average to above average at, then it's just suboptimal.
yeah.
And so I've always sort of focused on what are some of the things that I could do best and how can I best help the organization grow? And let me focus the majority of my time doing those things. Throw away whether it's the ego or the vanity or whatever that comes with maybe staying in a certain job just because it's nice to have. I'd rather spend my time and I'd rather be challenged on, let me just go and add the most value I can in the limited finite time of my work week.
Wow. What's been the most challenging part of your experience?
There was a moment when we were building the stadium and we had to take a loan from Goldman Sachs to be able to get the stadium sort of construction loan done to be able to start building. And the collateral for the loan was the team itself.
Wow.
And so the way we were going to pay off the loan was by selling seat licenses and sponsorships and naming rights, and to the tune of over $1 billion worth of contractually obligated income.
Wow.
But we had to take this loan and take this risk before we were able to sell all that, obviously, because if we'd sold all that, we wouldn't need the loan. So there was a period of time there where we're like thinking to ourselves, well, shoot, we have literally everything on the line. We have to be able to sell seat licenses. And keep in mind, this is in an environment where seat licenses had not been sold successfully in the Bay Area. The Raiders had attempted some smaller version of it in Oakland and hadn't been done. So we had everything on the line. We had to sell it. Otherwise, like, it wasn't going to be, it might have been the Goldman 49ers. And so we had to go out and deliver what we did. We had to make that promise before we went on sale and sold. So there was a lot of pressure during that time to be able to deliver.
Wow, that's super, super interesting. I didn't even know you could structure something that way. I'm curious, I mean, looking into you and looking in your history, it was very clear to me that there's such a tactical, strategic business component to this field that I don't think people always understand. I mean, I'm curious, what do you think about this field is most misunderstood to date that people still don't fully understand from the outside looking in?
People think it's just the sport on the field, whatever game is being played, and that's all it is, and players and coaches, like I thought all the way through college. And I consider myself, at least I thought I was a smart kid, but I didn't even know that there's this whole other business and there's so many other departments, and it's not just the sporting side. There's finance and PR and communications and sponsorships and ticket sales and community relations. There's just so much more to building a kind of a full stack organization. And especially today's professional sports team is very different from yesterday's, in that, like, we are starting down the track of being more like a Fortune 500 company.
Wow.
Our shareholders are not just the ownership of the team, but the shareholders are the fans as well. So you have a certain accountability and responsibility to each fan who chooses to support the 49ers or who chooses to support Leeds United. You have a certain responsibility to them as well. And so in many ways, we're like just a bunch of little public companies.
To what degree can you view fans as shareholders versus customers of the company?
Yeah, I think it's both, right? So
Okay.
I think, of course, they're customers because they're fans, they're buying tickets and things like that. I just mean that when people say that this is the fans' team, right, and we're just stewards of the team, that is really what it feels like and what it should be and what feels right, because this is the Bay Area's 49ers. And everybody who chooses to be a fan of the 49ers, we have a responsibility to them to do everything we can to be as successful as we can be on and off the field, certainly on the field, because, it is the community's team. And I mentioned this especially at Leeds United, where you're born into a club in the UK. You don't really pick one. You're born into it based on what your parents were or where you live. And one of the clubs over there, calling someone a fan is a disservice, because it's really like the club is part of your family. It's like a little brother or a little sister that you can poke fun of and make fun of inside your own home. But if anybody else outside makes fun of, you want to beat them up or something because you want to protect your little brother or sister. That's how it is.
Yeah.
And so being an owner, okay, you have a financial stake in it, but really we're just stewards of the club. That's how it feels in both places. And so if and when we lose a game, it's not just that we're bummed out for the players and coaches and for us. I'm bummed out for all our fans that expected better, that wanted better, and wanted the best possible effort we can. And there's a weight that comes with that, a weight of accountability and responsibility that comes with that.
Yeah. I want to spend one more second on that weight and responsibility, because football is the American sport. Everyone watches it. It's talked about. It takes over people's lives in football season.
Yep.
What is it like running an enterprise that caters to so many people compared to the average company out there?
Yeah, you mentioned it earlier. It's very unique in that anything and everything that we do is usually out in the public and usually publicly scrutinized, if not criticized, right? Like every decision.
Yeah.
You've got to be very confident and have a very thick skin. Very confident in terms of, like, you have conviction on what you're doing, because everything is available for public consumption and discourse and debate.
Yeah.
And every Monday morning quarterback and every armchair quarterback, including my wife after every game, tells me certain decisions or certain things that she wishes we had done or not done. So that is something that is very unique about it, because company in the business space, if they suddenly produce less widgets than they expected the previous month, nobody really cares. Nobody really notices, unless it's on the quarterly report, and nobody really cares. It's very different in pro sports.
That makes a lot of sense. We spent a lot of time talking about the 49ers and also Leeds. I want to spend a second on cricket. It's a relatively unpopular sport in the US compared to other sports and around the world. How are you embracing the challenge of helping cricket gain traction here?
So let me first correct that because that's a little bit of a misnomer
Okay.
in that it's not a popular sport. So let me give you one interesting fact to prove you wrong.
Okay.
The T20 World Cup between England and New Zealand, July of 2019, I think. I was there for it, and it was in England. And it was on at 3:30 in the morning San Francisco time, 6:30 in the morning New York time. And keep in mind, like a lot of the people who are cricket fans here are from generally the South Asian subcontinent, right?
Yep.
India, Pakistan, but also some Aussie and Brits and fans who have come here. And it was on in the middle of the night. It was on a pay-per-view. It was on Willow, which is a pay-to-subscribe channel. And it was streamed in 1 or 2 million households at that time, paying on pay-per-view to watch two random teams, not like India was playing in the World Cup final like we usually do. Those numbers, that's greater than the MLS Cup final. That's greater than an NBA regular season game. That rivals a Major League Baseball playoff game that are on Fox on prime time on a Friday night at 7 p.m. Right? So it's actually a little bit misunderstood. There is a very passionate, very hardcore, ardent cricket fan base here. And it happens to be the second largest sport in the world. And we are the largest media market in the world. So it doesn't even matter what sport it is. When you hear that sentence, it just tells you there's an opportunity here to build something special.
Yeah.
And where you already have a very high floor. And that's just from the hardcore fans. If we can steal a few from some of the other sports or create a few from the excitement of the game, I think the sky's the limit. And I think we've seen from the success of the IPL, which is a T20 league, the 3-hour format, and that's the format we're going to use here in the US, and how electric that game is and the atmosphere is. It's something that we can replicate and build something really big here.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing and really, really exciting to hear. And to be honest, I did not know that it had already gained that much traction in the States. So pretty exciting to hear as someone who grew up with it always playing in the background of my house.
Did you really?
Yeah, I mean, my dad is an avid cricket sports fan. I mean, that was the sport he grew up watching.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit more like pulling teeth with some of the other sports, but it's automatically on the TV when I walk through the door.
Yep.
Yeah. So I want to chat a little bit about some of the other things you're doing. And one of those is that you're a lecturer at Stanford GSB. You teach classes on negotiations and sports and media.
Yep.
What's your biggest takeaway that you want students to get when they walk out of your classes?
So in my negotiations class, with respect to negotiations, there's just one important premise, and that is throughout the whole year, or throughout the whole quarter, it's something that's an undertone to every session. It's that negotiations is not about what you get. It's about how you feel about what you get. And so really it's a half psychology, half negotiations course, because it's really about how to deal with behavioral dynamics and how empathy and understanding how the other party feels and making sure you feel good. All of those things are really important. And so that's something that's really key. And I think the other one for me is all around just trying to be able to pay it forward because, I got a chance. Like I said, this is an industry about who you know, not what you know. I want to be able to help people, give them the right skills and give them the right access to be able to break through that. They don't need a connection or a brother or sister or having played. Like they can get into sports by the merits of their own talent. And so that's the other thing that I want to, just kind of train a new generation of very talented individuals that deserve to be in the sports industry.
Yeah, and turn it into a meritocracy. That's awesome. The last thing I'm curious about is there's this amazing quote in The Athletic about you, and it says, he's still here, having outlasted the executives who hired him, the coaches he helped hire, and the pitchforks that tried to run him out of town. With that in mind, what's next for you? What's your big vision? What are the big goals you're trying to accomplish in the coming years?
I don't know. And actually, I think that's what excites me is that I don't know what I don't know. What I do know is I want to be able to continue to grow as an organization and use the skills and talents that we have here to be able to accomplish more things. Obviously, I want to win a Super Bowl and I want to play in the Champions League. Those are obvious material goals, but it's really just being able to grow here and continue to help my peers and fellow executives, help them achieve whatever their career goals are.
Absolutely. Well, super excited to see all the work that you continue to do. Thank you so much for joining me on Trailblazers today, Parag. Wonderful to have you.
Of course.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode. If you want to get new episodes straight to your inbox, subscribe to our newsletter at southasiantrailblazers.com and follow us at South Asian Trailblazers on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn.